Well, good morning, America, and welcome back to the Rhine Report. And good morning to those of you who are brave enough, you brave few, who can still access my humble podcasts. The Google-owned entity, YouTube, continues to shadow block my broadcasts so that with one notable exception, they remain rather subterranean and in a relative obscurity. If this does reach you, please subscribe and recommend, as it might help to allow for a larger audience and to defeating the algorithm. Now, yesterday, I celebrated the decision from SCOTUS that favored the state of Illinois in Trump versus Illinois, denying a stay to Trump that would have destroyed the TROs in place by state authorities that have blocked him from deploying National Guard troops into the streets of their cities, while also opining that Trump's misuse of 10 U.S.C. Section 12406 was completely invalid. Now, it is clear that without the timely intercession of Professor Marty Lederman of Georgetown Law, this decision would have turned out quite differently. His amicus brief buried Trump and his Nazi majority on the court in such a powerful manner that even this cabal could not justify the intercession of National Guard troops on the streets of cities under the statute employed by this Nazi regime. A victory, yes. Definitive, no. Why do I say that? Here is why. Although the invocation of 10 U.S.C. Section 12406 was invalidated, the Chief Justice Roberts' opinion for the court provided enough information to the Trump Nazis that did provide a rather significant blueprint in its explications for them to utilize what would be a more effective tool to overcome the Posse Comitatis Act of 1807, falling just short of naming the Insurrection Act as the means to overcome the PSA. And therein lies our dilemma. Because my reading of the Insurrection Act suggests, given the predicate of judicial deference already lent to the executive under this dystopian regime and fascist court, any use of the act will be accorded a deference to which it is not entitled in law and under our Constitution, being nothing more than a doctrine, both out of place and an impediment to findings reflecting truth, justice, and in keeping with our foundational principles. As we have seen in numerous cases, taking Appellate Judge Nelson in California, in Trump versus California, as an example, executive deference seems to be an important element in the decision-making process of some courts, appellate and supreme, who seem to discount or ignore facts untethered to the true conditions on the ground that utterly repudiate the wild and extortionate claims of a rogue and Nazi-style government. Let me note here that although appellate courts and SCOTUS hearing appeals by writ or emergency applications are not supposed to dispute factual findings of the trial courts developed on the record below, unless clearly erroneous. They seem to be doing just that, though. On the one hand, deference is being handed to Trump and the executive, and on the other, factual findings in contradiction of the executive's mad claims he makes, while the factual record is being ignored or challenged without judicial merit in disrespect to long-time judicial practice. So, all this sets the stage for the Trump regime's inevitable use of the Insurrection Act, first finding a tool or tools to act as a predicate for the intercession of federalized National Guard and military units back into the streets. He's not giving up on this. It isn't hard to imagine the possible pretext, as they are secrets in plain sight, where the evidence is manifest and publicly announced both in actions, words, and foreign policies, including mass murders on the high seas, blockades of Venezuelan assets, as well as the theft of another country's oil tankers and a false pronouncement of a fake narco-terrorist war. And of course, there is the old standby, fake violent crime allegations in our cities already having been used to rationalize troop deployments. So, what is the purpose of military and the National Guard in the streets, you might ask? Simple. If push comes to shove, troops will be used to interfere, back up cancellation of elections, or to intimidate voters in 2026 and beyond in order for Trump to retain power. Just remember and think back to the insurrection, January 2020. So, let's look at the Insurrection Act of 1807 to understand why it is such a dangerous, ambiguous, and threatening statute, and is considered to be the only viable means to overcome the solemn Posse Comitatis Act in its prohibition against using military troops in our cities as law enforcement. The Insurrection Act of 1807, Chapter 39, 2, Stat 443, and I'll read it to you. In all cases of insurrection or obstruction to the laws, either of the United States or of any individual state or territory, where it is lawful for the President of the United States to call forth the militia for the purpose of suppressing such insurrection or of causing the laws to be duly executed, it shall be lawful for him to employ for the same purposes such part of the land or naval force of the United States as shall be judged necessary, having first observed all the prerequisites of the law in that respect. Now, forget insurrection. All that is required here is a mere claim of obstruction to the laws that validates presidential intercession with militia. So, let's now turn to our modern codification with its 3 sections, one worse than another, while we can disregard or ignore 251 for the time being. So let's review sections 252 and 253. So let's look at 10 U.S.C. Chapter 13, Insurrection. Section 252, use of militia and armed forces to enforce federal authority. And I'm reading from the section. Whenever the President considers that unlawful obstructions, combinations or assemblages, or rebellion against the authority of the United States makes it impracticable to enforce the laws of the United States in any state by the ordinary course of judicial proceedings, he may call into federal service such of the militia of any state and use such of the armed forces as he considers necessary to enforce those laws or to suppress the rebellion. My God, this covers a wide variety of possibilities. So we don't need insurrection. All we require is an unlawful obstruction or a combination or an assemblage or a rebellion. So we don't need rebellion. We don't need insurrection. And we only need it to be impracticable to enforce the laws of the United States. Now, there is a caveat, which is by the ordinary course of judicial proceedings, but I wouldn't depend on that in any case. This is a fucking disaster. Now, Section 253 is interference with state and federal law. The President, and I'm reading from the section, the President, by using the militia or the armed forces, or both, or by any other means, shall take such measures as he considers necessary to suppress in any state any insurrection, domestic violence, unlawful combination, or conspiracy if it, 1, so hinders the execution of the laws of that state and of the United States within the state, that any part or class of its people is deprived of a right, privilege, immunity, or protection named in the Constitution and is secured by law, and the constituted authorities of that state are unable, fail, or refuse to protect the right, privilege, or immunity, or to give that protection, or 2, opposes or obstructs the execution of the laws of the United States or impedes the course of justice under those laws. This is so far-reaching. It goes well beyond, 124.06, which has just been defeated. So there's an incredible hurdle to overcome, or set of hurdles to overcome, if Trump, push comes to shove, invokes the Insurrection Act. But thank you all for watching. I hope you've learned something about these statutes, because this is all about our freedom, our independence, our Constitution, our foundational principles. Our democracy is at stake. Please remember to subscribe and let this channel grow. Thank you.